joy to be in the embrace of the Constitution Project, given that I've spent my entire week with the gun vote getting emails from people telling me I'm violating the Constitution, which I don't think is quite right. It was quite a week in the Senate, and it actually is really inspiring to be here and think about past fights that people stood up for and won, and that things aren't always won in 1 month or 1 year, and we will move on from there. I want to congratulate all of the honorees, of course, but I just wanted to say before I present the award a few just words about the Vice President, who has been my mentor since I got into politics. What many of you, the Minnesota people, know, but many of you don't know, is that my first job in Washington was as his intern. And my first job as his intern, when he was Vice President, was crawling around under every piece of furniture in the Vice President's staff and taking a furniture inventory for an entire month. And you will be happy to know that nothing was missing, as the Vice President is very honest. And what I love to tell other students is that that was my first job in Washington, and this was my second. Very seriously. From there, I got to work with the Vice President and see him run for president, and like so many young girls at that time, I will never forget that moment. When he stood there in St. Paul with Geraldine Ferraro at his side and announced that he was picking the first woman vice presidential running mate. And I remember her white pearls, and I remember thinking that anything and everything is possible. I went on to be able to work with him at the Dorsey & Whitney law firm for a number of years, and then I later became a prosecutor. And when I hear this story, and I thought about it a lot when I was in my job for 8 years as the chief prosecutor for Minnesota's biggest county, you think about him, and then you think about the choices you have. Like, should you let the Innocence Project review all the murder cases you've had in the history of your office? I thought of Walter Mondale, and I said yes. And none of them are wrong. Or you think about, should you go into the legislature and advocate for more funding for public defenders, and you think, what would Walter Mondale would do? He would have done that, and so I did it. Or you think about Minnesota being a landmark state for actually videotaping every in-custody interrogation. And you have to decide, are you going to fight that, or are you going to go around the country and say it's a good idea, because that's what Walter Mondale would do? That's what we did in our office. So he has been an inspiration for justice, an inspiration for the country, and I'm just very honored to be here today to present him with this wonderful award. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy, for those kind words. In Minnesota, we're so proud of Amy. She won such a big victory in Minnesota last time that not only did she outpace anything I'd ever done, but from his grave I heard Hubert complain. And that's just the way it is, isn't it? She's a remarkable public servant. We're very proud of her. And I'm very grateful to you for being present here tonight. I got a call as a brand new Attorney General from Yale Kenazar, who was a criminal law professor at the University of Minnesota. And by the way, I've got the Dean of the University of Minnesota Law School, David Whitman, with us here tonight. And one of the brightest students, Mike Berman, here tonight from the University Law School. I can't go on anymore. And Kenazar said, did you get a letter from the Attorney General of Florida? I said, yeah, I just threw it away. He said, pardon me. He said, and we talked about it, and he said, we really, if you would, we'd like to get efforts going for an amicus brief on the side of Gideon. I said, if you'll help me, we'll do it. And he worked with Harvard, with Eddie McCormick, with people like Tom Eagleton, the great, great young Attorney General of Missouri. And we put, before we got done, as we've heard a couple times, we had, I think, 22 attorneys general in the United States saying, yes, in America, at the state level, in our jurisdiction, every indigent felony defendant should be provided with counsel. And I think that Yale said that doesn't happen too often, where law enforcement officers stand up and plead for expanded rights for the defendants. He said about as often as Haley's Comet is observed is what happened. But we did it. I have to tell you, I don't think it was that hard. The public seemed to understand it. There's been strong support for the Gideon principle. As an old law enforcement officer who used to be on the other side, I'm comforted when the lawyer for the defendant is there to make the case and make certain that we don't just make mistakes as we proceed. So this is a principle that has been adopted now by the Supreme Court. In Gideon's life, the difference between having a lawyer and not one was 5 years. The first time around, without counsel, he was convicted, put in the slammer for 5 years. The second time around, with good counsel, before the Supreme Court and in a retrial in Florida, he was acquitted. And I think that's an example of how justice can work with proper counsel. This is a principle that's under severe strain now. I thought when the Supreme Court ruled that'd be it, and that's what the court said. But instead of that, across the country, as that excellent film showed, the way trials actually are run in some places in the country, the right to counsel is almost a disappearing right, despite the decision. You have the public defenders who are overworked, their budgets are being cut, they've got caseloads that any lawyer in practice would never accept. But that's the deal. And there are some lawyers, regrettably, who are themselves having troubles. And they're not providing proper defenses, and sometimes they're providing shameful displays of how bad a lawyer can be. But we all know this, and we need to get back on reasserting the Gideon principle. There's one other point, and then I'll sit down. Today, trials are increasingly a rare thing in America. Over 90% of the crimes that are charged never see the inside of a courtroom. And if I had a client who was charged with something, the fact that I could go to the court and make my case and maybe win it would be an important point of strength in dealing for justice in that trial or in any trial. But today, especially prosecutors who can be armed with these long sentences, indeterminate sentences, now with more and more criminal laws making different parts of the same act separate crimes, it is possible for a prosecutor who is so inclined to negotiate with the defendant on terms where most defendants plead guilty rather than to take a chance in the court. And so I would say it's sometimes called the trial penalty that's developed in America. People don't talk about it much, but I think this whole thing we work for, we're celebrating tonight, is slipping away under circumstances that shouldn't make us complacent at all. So let's get on with it and push again for public support for public defenders. I think we should urge the Supreme Court to put some more muscle into the Gideon principle. The idea that a counsel should be adequate proves to be a pretty loose standard. And although it's tough politically, I think everybody should try to stand up and put some energy behind this fight. Thank you.